let's take a look at the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is going to be surrounded and protected by this bony structure, which is the vertebra. So this is the body of the vertebra. That's going to be positioned more anteriorly or ventrally. And this is the spinous process of the vertebra. And that's going to project posteriorly or dorsally. And that's going to be the bump-like structure that you can see projecting out through your skin when you have your back hunched over. At the very center of the spinal cord here, we can see a structure that's going to be involved with the ventricular system in the central nervous system, and that is going to contain cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. This projection of gray matter is going to consist of the cell bodies of the neurons in the spinal cord, is called the gray commissure. So it is going to cross the midline of the spinal cord and connect the two hemispheres. There are some other gray matter structures here, and those include the dorsal horn of gray matter, the lateral horn of gray matter, and the ventral horn of gray matter. For the white matter, or the area of the spinal cord that contains the axons of the neurons that will be traversing superiorly here as well as inferiorly, these are called the funiculi. So in the posterior funiculus here is where we're going to find the dorsal white columns. This is the lateral funiculus, and this is the ventral funiculus. This is the ventral median fissure, and this is the posterior median sulcus. There are going to be layers of connective tissue that surround the structures within the central nervous system, both the brain and the spinal cord, which are the two components of the central nervous system. So lying superficially on the spinal cord will be a layer called the pia mater. The pia mater. Superficial to that will be the subarachnoid space, and that's going to continue around the perimeter of the spinal cord here, and that's going to be the area that contains the cerebrospinal fluid. So when a lumbar puncture is done below the L2 vertebra, this is going to be the area where a clinician can pull a sample of cerebrospinal fluid for testing for conditions such as meningitis, for example. So in that naming of this structure was the word arachnoid. So you may think of arachnophobia when you hear that word. And the reason why it has that name is that in life, though not depicted on this model, there are going to be web-like structures that are going to be found in this subarachnoid space. And that's how it gets its name. The layer of meninges that overlies the subarachnoid space is the arachnoid mater. So this layer is the arachnoid mater. Superficial to that is the, in yellow paint here, the subdural space. The subdural space. Superficial to that is the dura mater, or tough mother. That's the thickest of the three meningeal layers, and that's going to help protect the underlying structures. This is the epidural space with adipose tissue. Projecting off of the dorsal surface of the spinal cord will be the dorsal rootlets, and projecting off ventrally here, we have the ventral rootlets. The same thing will apply on the other hemisphere of the spinal cord, but I'm showing you this side because on the model, the connective tissue sheaths are reflected so that you can see the underlying structures. So both the dorsal rootlets and the ventral rootlets will converge into a mixed spinal nerve. And when I say mixed, that means it has both sensory and motor information in it, as the dorsal rootlets bring in sensory information and the ventral rootlets are efferent in that they contain motor information. So this is the mixed spinal nerve. And this enlargement here is going to be a collection of cell bodies that is considered part of the peripheral nervous system. And because it's in the peripheral nervous system and we have a collection of cell bodies, that's going to be called a ganglion. In the central nervous system, if we have a collection of cell bodies, that's going to be called a nucleus. And if there are many of them, nuclei. And this in particular, this particular ganglion, is the dorsal root ganglion. This will then diverge into the dorsal ramus. So the dorsal ramus will continue posteriorly here around the thoracic cage. And the ventral ramus will continue anteriorly here around the thoracic cage. The dorsal ramus will actually continue across the back. Okay, that is the spinal cord on the green Somso model.